Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It's Jason Harris here, and I'm joined by the one, the only, the Austin, and the oh-so-famous Mr. Jeff Tessier. Jeff, what's up? Austin, how you doing?
Excellent.
Hey, guys. Hey, thanks for joining today's show. This is Strategy with Jason. We're going to talk anything and everything we want to talk about when it comes to strategy. And, we'll always sprinkle a little automotive in there as well. But the core of this show is to talk about strategy, which is one of my favorite topics. You know what? I can't turn my brain off when it comes to it. I see it everywhere. I just there's a reason why my car's got this license plate that says strategy on it. I can't turn off the fact that you can see it play out. You can see it everywhere. It's in everything, right? You watch sports, you see the strategy, you see it get played out. I'm watching my kids and I'm watching them play, and I can see the strategy start to develop and get better with them. It's just it is all around us. And in this podcast, we get to talk everything we want to talk when it comes to it. I know, Austin, you got some topics you want to jam about today. What do you got?
Yes, so we're going to talk about branding, and we're going to talk about standing out from the rest of the market. And nobody did it better than the unfortunate news of hearing about Ryan Smolkin passing away. He was the master at standing out in a crowded market and using brand to really create an amazing experience, an amazing brand. And Jason, I know you had Ryan on the podcast at one point. And
yeah, me and Ryan met. We actually connected online via LinkedIn, maybe about 4 years ago or so. And we just, I admired his commitment to his brand. It wasn't until, after I had an opportunity to do a podcast with him, I kind of understood, that his brand went way beyond just a marketing strategy, and his brand really was a culture. And not only on how he ran his business, but how he trained his employees, how he grew his business, brand, it's rare when a brand evolves beyond a brand and it evolves into a culture. And Ryan did that, and it's, I don't know, Jeff, you sent me the text when you saw that, and wow, to lose him, it's a bummer, man. Yeah, he was a really, really cool guy. I had an opportunity, like I said, we're best friends by any means, more just, watch each other at afar, what they were doing online and in social media. We did podcasts together, and that guy's definitely going to be missed, I'm sure, by a lot of people. But, and I love the fact that you brought this up, because, I think what he achieved is rare and very much so worth talking about. And anybody that has never had I'm going to say it right. Poutine. I can't always say it wrong. It's been 15 years I lived in Canada. I still say it wrong. Jeff, how do I say it?
Poutine is okay. Poutine or poutine, sorry, in French, but it doesn't matter.
Jeff, for anybody
else, totally good enough.
Jeff, everybody. We're not talking about a name of some car built in China. For everybody who don't know what that is, can you explain to them the beauty of what that is?
Well, traditional would be nice golden crisp French fries with some fresh cheese curds, squeakier the better, and a dark beef gravy over top. Now, Ryan took it many steps further and made so many dishes out of it. It's ridiculous. I was looking at their menu this morning, and I was just like, oh, I couldn't even imagine what some of these would taste like, right? But I do always have some kind of like my comfort food is poutine. So, but I enjoy most of the ones like the bacon on top or mushrooms sometimes. But I really, the traditional sense, totally mine. comfort.
What does squeaky cheese curds mean?
That's what I was thinking, but it makes sense.
The fresher they are, the squeakier they are, and they just have that, like when you're in your
Firmness? Or
it's not
interesting.
No, I actually know what you're talking about. There's kind of like it's a little squeak. There's a squeak to it. You know?
when it's fresh. I guess because they're so, I don't know, the way they're processed, damp, or I don't know what it is, the moisture in it. Like it's like almost like a mozzarella piece, right? But it's just the way they're processed. The squeakier they are, the better they taste.
People are going to be listening to the show. Like, I thought this was a
Frick is he talking
podcast about strategy. What the hell are they talking about food for? You know?
Yeah.
But
They're making me hungry. But
like I said, look, I'm glad that this came up. I'm glad we're talking about it. It's very unfortunate. But I think it's just a great way to kind of just, honor the person and the businessman he was, is to identify the rarity of what he accomplished. And I do say rarity because I don't think it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen where someone goes out with the intent to build a brand, but the brand evolves beyond a brand. And like I said, ultimately turns into a culture. So, I mean, I'll give you guys, if you don't know Ryan's history, definitely I encourage you to go out there and read a little bit about him. But he was on, well, when I asked him what his goal was, it was world domination. But it was world domination of the restaurant industry and how people perceived, all right, fries, cheese curds, and gravy. But not just that, and he did, and the company had an artistic approach to it. All right, many different variations from butter chicken to a burger version, to a pizza version, to pretty much anything you could into it. But it was also the passion behind it. I mean, guys, it's fries, gravy, and cheese. I mean,
how do you make anything out of that, right? And half the world doesn't even know what that is.
Yeah, half the world. I mean,
maybe more than half.
Probably 90% of the world out there doesn't know what it is. But it's just, the time I got to spend with him is just the passion behind what, not only but the product, but the way that he wanted to, his passion to present the product to the world. He wanted everybody to try this. And I will say, to me today, it is one of the best comfort foods. I'm now living here in Nashville, Tennessee. There's one restaurant that's literally right up the street, and the owner is from Canada, and he does make it. And it's like the only place. And even my daughter the other day goes, "Can we go there? I need a poutine." And it's if you're from the South, you understand what I'm talking about when it comes to comfort food. There are just certain foods that just take you to your happy place, and for a lot of people, that's what a poutine is. And Ryan wanted to share that with the world. That was his global domination. was his goal. But not only did he have passion for this amazing comfort food, he also had passion for 80s rock and roll. and along with that was plaid.
Yeah.
It's growing up. All right. It was, listening to Kiss, Gene Simmons, just, rock party all night, rock and roll all day. You have a little piece? You got a piece of it? All right, let's show it.
So this is just the intro of your podcast with him.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining another episode of Strategy Mob. Now, today is a unique episode. In fact, I've been looking forward to doing this episode.
So I just want to give you a little taste of Ryan's personality with the beginning of this podcast here.
Patinery, Ryan Smolkin. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me today.
Gotta fire it up, brother. That's what it's all about.
That's right. We're gonna bring the heat, and I'm going to have to adjust a lot of audio during this one because I know Ryan's going to be very passionate. So Ryan is a very passionate person.
Staying calm this time. This one, I'm staying calm. I'm usually the lead. Now I'm the follower. I'm staying calm. I'm not overshadow, brother.
Well, hey, Ryan, to kind of get us.
So that's a little taste of Ryan.
You know what, though? That energy and that passion, I don't know if the guy ever knew how to turn it off. At least I never saw it. I'm sure there are people that were much closer to him. But I would be surprised if he ever turned that off. There was just, there's an art. No, it was like always wore plaid. Had like, I mean, pretty much you felt like, you know, he was at a rock concert everywhere. You know, in his head, all right, it was, you know, I'm pretty sure Gene Simmons is playing in the back of his head, you know, party all night, rock and roll all day, you know, like just, and that's just how the guy lived his life. And so he took his passion for rock and roll, his passion for this food, and his passion for people, and just wanted to mold all of this together, and then kind of wrap it in this plaid, you know, wrapping paper and just give it to the world. And like I said, it rare, very, very rare for someone who goes out to set out. But I think it was also from a culture perspective, you know, you got to go and see there are, you know, monster fans, just absolutely dedicated fans to the restaurant, to the brand, to the food. The staff are equally as excited, you know, as I think he was. And there's many, you know, videos out there of the staff just embracing this love for this comfort food and just rock and roll. And
I think it may seem like it's totally just his personality and it's coming just out of him organically, but I do think there was a lot of strategy with it too, you know, like. So I'm going to play this tidbit here from the podcast, and he gets into talking about exactly the strategy of like understanding his demographic and matching sort of the brand with the demographic. So it's not necessarily just totally him just being him. There's a lot of business strategy behind it.
I agree. To telling the story. I feel that consumers buy into a story way before they buy into a product. You know, I mean, think of how many restaurants out there sell fries, gravy, and cheese curds. You know, thousands of them out there, but they don't have your story. And I feel like any small business, I don't care if they're an automotive dealership or they're selling plumbing supplies, or, you know, they're a real estate agent, or the king of poutines. You know, like there's an art to that storytelling. And I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that of, you know, how do you start with that story, and how do you get that to resonate with your audience?
Again, I can't take credit for it. I have to give that to Smoke. I just have to always say that. That's my disclaimer, because I cannot take credit. That's the only thing he might pull the plug on me and take it back. But it's just looking at your audience, look at the voids, look at what's out there, and it's in every industry, like you're saying. It's like food. Food for me is like, it's obviously you guys know too in your industry too. It's just oversaturated, and you got to stand out. And it's everybody's, especially now with the economic times what we're into. You're just in this big pot of fucking mud, and you got to stand out and be loud. And that's where the "Stay the Fuck Inside" poem and video came out, because we had to stand out. You got to say something louder than everybody else is to get noticed, right? And so from the beginning of time, that's what we've been doing. And even though in this industry, technically poutineery did not exist. But you know, we're not competing against at that time other poutineries. We're competing against everything and anything out there that, in our certain case, I was focused on nightlife, right? Midnight to 4 a.m., downtown urban core, you know, 18 to 25, university towns. Like that was our core market. They've got the money.
There's a lot of people fighting for that audience.
Exactly. Still lots of people find shawarma place, you know, falafel, pizza slices, subs, like anything you can think of. That's who we're up against. So saturated again. But that's where I think our brand evolved from. Technically, to answer the first question you had 15 minutes ago, was because of our target audience, right? It starts with the target and who we're going after, not so much the product. We could have been selling fucking anything. And that's interesting. I even say that to slip that in, they get off subject and then come back to it later for you.
That's what we'll do this whole podcast.
Even from the very beginning, and still to this day, even at our trade shows, even like, so this is top down. This is like global headquarters. We're doing the trade shows and I'm selling this in. Like these are our trade show booth is like, it's platified again. It's a full rock and roll stage show. And it literally looks like we have this huge rock and roll stage that it looks like we're blasting the
so cool
rock the whole time. We're blasting the 80s rock. I'm air guitaring out front and singing the songs to everybody, full fatigue for 12 hours. They think I'm just some entertainment dude. They don't know I own the whole puppy. And it's just entertainment right from the very beginning, because that's going to attract the right people that we want as our partners and our franchisees.
Love it. Dude.
I went through the recession,
Oh,
you know, and even prior to that, you know, oh man, too early. You know, I was just gonna say, you know,
so
but
I guess how do dealers sort of embrace that strategy of standing out by knowing your audience?
well, you know, I think it's any good marketing strategy, any good brand strategy, you spend more time acknowledging who your audience is, and not necessarily what the product or what the results are going to be, right? there, there's a strategy in marketing where when you're talking to someone, not at someone. Okay, so let me go there. Okay, so you know, marketing, good marketing, proper marketing, right, is talking to someone. 99% of marketing out there is targeting at someone. It's talking at them. And then it's rare to run a proper campaign where you actually get to talk to someone, because what you're doing is you're talking to your audience. You know your audience. You intimately know your audience. You've spent tons of time in research. All right. Maybe you've been that audience at one point, or if not, you put yourself in the shoes of that audience. And then the messaging that comes out from that is so unique and catered to that. I mean, Jeff, I'm sure you've seen some examples of this too, no?
Yeah.
What would be one that's off the top of your head?
Sorry, I'm just drawing a blank. Just, but yeah, you know, like to me, it's if you're not speaking just like those commercials, like you need to buy this today only type of stuff, right? What you got a message that's gonna give your audience a reason of why it is they want to do business with you versus just anybody else. What is it that you have to offer? Maybe it's your, you know, what your presence at your store is going to be like, or the you know, how you're going to be in that involvement down the road. I don't know. I'm thinking things like that, right?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. I think on the automotive side, let's take a look at Jeep. Okay, Jeep Wrangler, still in my opinion, one of the worst vehicles. Okay, look, it's the only. I think it's the only frame on top build SUV still built, isn't it? I mean, it
Probably.
rattles, it shakes, it leaks. All right, the hood flutters like this when you go down the highway at 70 miles an hour. Well, maybe the newer ones have been a little bit better, but listen, fundamentally though, they know their audience, and they could have changed. Right? They could have taken all this stuff away. All right, they could have remodeled the entire thing, or it doesn't shake, and they could have gone to independent suspension, and they could have gone with a different type of roof, so you don't have panels, and it's not leaking anymore. Like they could have done all of that. They didn't. All right, they knew their audience. They stuck to their audience, and that's why you look at a Jeep from 2000, a 2008 to a Jeep in 2023 fundamentally is not that different from each other at all. Right? I mean, almost all the way down to the design. Now, of course, headlights are nicer, interior is a little bit nicer, stuff like that, but they still do the same thing. They still shake, they whistle, they're loud. All right, if you own a Jeep, you've broken a windshield at least half a dozen times in the time that you've owned it, because it's completely flat and anything that hits it will crack. Like it's, talk about a product that they took the time to understand the audience. All right. They committed to the audience and they never changed. They kept it. They kept the brand with the brand. Now, see, again, we talk about brand gets to a point where it evolves out of brand and turns into a culture.
Well,
And
that's the thing with the Jeep, right? Yeah.
That's the Jeep Wrangler. All right. Like
they've got their own little cult following where their slogans are, it's a Jeep thing. You wouldn't understand.
Exactly.
So unless you're in that community, you're not actually a part of the same feeling, right? Like they have their own little signals they pass to each other while driving down the road. They all have their off-roading experiences and things like that, right? And so Jeep has kind of, maybe they created that in the beginning and let that evolve into what it is today, and have identified that they're not going to let that go. They're just going to let that culture continue, right?
Because they know their audience, they didn't change. Do you understand what I mean? Like they identify.
Fun, yeah.
It didn't change, right? Like, I mean, think about that's like, Ryan did the same thing. He identified his audience, all right, and I can guarantee you, if he was still with us, even 20 years from now, he'd still be wearing plaid, all right, air guitaring, to an 80s rock band. Like, it just knows the audience, made a commitment to talking to that audience, not to marketing to that audience, not marketing at that audience. Yeah. Same thing we see in automotive. It's a Jeep thing, right? Like, look at every commercial. Any Jeep out there, all right, is driving up the side of a mountain, barreling through a river. It's a Jeep thing. Who the hell goes and spends $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on a vehicle and literally turns around, rips the doors off of it, and drives through a bloody river?
Sign me up, yeah.
It's a Jeep thing. It's a Jeep thing. But I think, as anybody out there watching and listening right now, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, this is something that we can strive for. But you have to know your audience. And, I still don't think I've even ever gotten to this place yet where I know my audience so well that I'm able to market to them, not at them. I mean, I think we've had bits and points of time where that is, but it's rare. And I think it's, and this is why we wanted to talk about Ryan today, because it's just rare. And I wanted to acknowledge it because not a lot of companies, big, small, medium, or anything, ever get to a point where, you create something that evolves beyond brand and into culture. And, you are connecting with your audience. So you're connecting with your audience in a way that's so deep, it goes beyond the product. Right. And that's the same thing Jeep did. It's a Jeep thing, right? It's like, so much so that, people will continue to buy these things even if they don't take them off-road. It is just.
And I think a brand says something about the individual. So if you do business with Jeep, you're saying that you're an outdoorsy person and you're like adventure, and it's you, by you doing business with a certain brand, it's sort of has to fit into your personality. And so if your brand doesn't stand for a particular audience, it doesn't say anything about that person by doing business with them. And I think that Ryan did that really well, where he made it cool to associate yourself with that brand, and also knew his audience so well that he, as a person, and his sort of energy would resonate with his younger audience.
I think it should be everybody's objective. And, I think sometimes we go out to build a brand for the sake of building a brand, not knowing necessarily what the goal and objective of building a brand is. And if you're out there watching and listening right now and you feel like you're kind of in that space, where you've been walking the path of building a brand, but you don't necessarily know where the finish line is, or what the objective or the goal behind it is. And, it is to take that passion, all right, but then turn the brand into something that connects at the human level, not just a marketing level. And this happens. It happens quite often. It doesn't happen quite often. And then I think that's why it's something that we should talk about and identify. And, I know I'm still a little taken back by the fact that if you guys young, like, it just, I can't say, God, I would have just loved to watch. I really was rooting for him. I wanted to see global domination. I wanted to see everybody in the world eating poutine. You know what I mean? But not just his, smokes poutine.
What was it when you talked about him in the last episode? You said he was opening a restaurant in like Qatar or something, like somewhere in the Middle East. Like, he was actually trying to do world domination.
He just such a passion for this comfort food that he wanted to share this warmth, this joy with just the world, and just, and then of course, next to that, his passion for 80s rock and roll bands, and just wanted to not only share his comfort food, but also, this culture of rock and roll. And yeah, man, way too young. Sucks.
How do you think you can sort of like identify your audience? And so like obviously like once you've identified your audience, you sort of listen to them and listen to their interests and listen to what they resonate in terms of your brand and your product. But how do you sort of get to the point where you know exactly who that audience is?
Well, knowing who your audience is, and I guess the way to, well, I mean, the data is there, right? The data is there of knowing who your audience is, right? And there's been many examples where the data has been there and we've ignored the data, right? Friend of mine, Brent Wees years ago talked about this at a conference, and he brought up Scion, right? In the automotive industry, you guys might remember Scion, right?
Yep.
And this was just literally the perfect example of not looking at the data to help identify your audience, right? The data was super clear, that it was people in their late 30s purchasing these vehicles. Yet the marketing department seemed to just want to completely ignore, like utterly ignore the data, and decided that it was going to be people in their early 20s that were going to buy these vehicles, even though they didn't have jobs or money to purchase a vehicle. And, they sponsored raves, and they sponsored, sporting events, and they did stupid advertisements, with people young in their 20s, drinking milk and eating donuts and doing circles in a parking lot inside of a Scion TC. It's just like they completely ignored the data, and the company no longer exists. So Scion as a brand doesn't exist because they ignored the data. So, Austin, your question was, how do you identify your audience? So the data is there, right? You have to first really break down the data, understand it, and then spend all your time committed to talking at that audience, not talking to that audience. It's like if your audience is soccer moms, all right, spend time knowing that audience. Invite soccer moms to the conversation. Stress test your messaging. Like it is, you're looking to be a part of their conversation, not try to, create not try to inject yourself into the conversation. And it's a tough. Well, I'm not gonna say it's tough. Actually, it's actually not that tough at all. But it's a commitment. Because as an industry, we would have to get away from the traditional marketing messages that we have of a $250 biweekly vehicle, because for many dealerships out there watching, listen right now, marketing is just a proverbial check, meaning like, check, I did it, it's done. I'm advertising the biweekly payment, but that's the polar opposite of talking to your audience.
And I think some people don't want to stand for something because they don't want to exclude a certain audience. It's like so there's a little bit of fear in actually
cast a wider net. Yeah.
Making a stance on something. Like that, because for the Ryan example, like what if people don't like his interests? Like you would think maybe like, so he's brave enough to stand for what he loves and his audience, but like that could be excluding a certain group of people that don't like heavy metal or rock bands or sort of that intense energy,
Yes, you're 100% right. Having that intense energy, that passion, look, it's you being you, and it's authentic, right? And, I think that it's worth the risk to be authentic and to put yourself out there in an authentic way, because more people are going to connect with you than they are going to be turned off by you by being authentically you, right? I may not appreciated 80s rock bands, all right, but what I do appreciate is the passion and the authenticity that that he had. Guys, look, I know we're towards the tail end of our conversation. If you're watching this or listening to this, please go out. I'd love for you to do some research and learn a little bit about Ryan and their company. Like I said, he did something that I think is very rare. We don't see it too often, and I think there's a lot to be learned there. If you guys would like to check out more content like this, visit strategywithjason.com. Thank you all for taking the time to jam with us today. Jeff, Austin, this has been great. You guys have yourself an amazing day.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.